Hello and welcome back to my channel and to my Claude Chabrol retrospective. Now we've moved on here from the Nouvelle Vague, the early Nouvelle Vague films, and we've jumped over the mid-60s, which was not a happy time for Chabrol. He sort of got mired in producing commercial films and genre films which were mostly dismissed by the critics. The film we're going to talk about today is Les Biches. And this was his comeback film. And it's the film for me where Chabrol, the director that I love, really comes into being. As I've got older, I've come to think of the early Nouvelle Vague almost as a trap, really. Okay, all these great directors started there and it was exciting and fun and they were learning how to make movies. But I don't think any of them really became themselves, really fully matured as a director in that period. They all became more interesting once they sort of fractaled out away from it. And so we get to 1967, and Chabrol finally finds out who he really is as a filmmaker, and he makes this bizarre film. Now, the title of the film, Les Biches, has several meanings. Biche is actually the name of female deer, of does in French, but it's also a slang term for girls, you know. It's in the title of the film in some American circles is the bad girls, the naughty girls, you know. It's a sort of slangy term for your average girl. And it also apparently, I've read this, that in France, les biches is also a sort of slang term for lesbians, which is kind of pertinent, as we'll see. I don't actually know if that's true, but I came across that on the internet. Now, the question I want to raise about this film, and this is about all cinema, not just this movie, is it possible to make a film which, in all its portrayals of people and situations, is completely and utterly unbelievable, completely and utterly artificial, rarefied, baroque, yet somehow be deeply moving and get to human truths? Is that possible? That's the question I ask myself when watching this movie. We start off this movie, the whole film is filmed in this beautiful kind of winter light, almost unreal, almost like fairy tale light. By this point, Chabrol was collaborating with Jean Rabier, who had become the cinematographer for most of his films. And he gives this special kind of light where it seems to glitter and glimmer, but also be sort of almost soft and out of focus. It gives this peculiar light to all of Chabrol's films, and it gives this kind of fairy tale, not quite real feel to it. And we start on a bridge in Paris overlooking the Seine. There's a young woman, played by Jacqueline Sassard, and she's a street artist. And then there's Stéphane Audran, who is now Mrs. Claude Chabrol, his wife, and is going to feature in all of the films that we're going to talk about for the near future of this retrospective. And she is in this kind of classic fur coat, very chic, very stylized. And she wanders along and throws like a huge franc note in this woman's cap. And the whole film, it's very stylized. It's almost like a dance, the start of a dance between these two people. And the artist eventually gets up, puts her stuff away, and walks away. She gets to exactly the edge of the screen. The cinematography and composition is very precise, and then walks back. So it's very artificially stylized. Then they go home together, and they start what appears to be a lesbian relationship. Now, I don't know if Chabrol and Paul Guégouf, his scriptwriter, knew very much about gay life, because these two women don't seem to be very realistic in terms of a lesbian relationship. In fact, most of the time they're together, they spend talking about men and what they think about men. And later on, Jacqueline Sassard will meet a man played by Jean-Louis Trintignant and start a relationship that seems semi-encouraged, by Stéphane Audran herself, although Audran will try her best to break it up, as we'll see. So it's a peculiar portrait. Are they gay? Are they bisexual? What is this really about? This question of the gayness of the film is thrown into really sharp relief when Stéphane Audran takes her new conquest to her beachside villa. And living with her in this beachside villa are these two men. They're sort of very comic actors who Chabrol uses every so often. And they play this gay couple who just happen to live in the house, completely dependent on Stéphane Audran and her money. And they're portrayed like two little boys. They're almost like characters out of Tintin who run around doing jobs and errands for Stefan Audran. I think modern day viewers might find it very close to homophobic, the portrayal of these two men. They're treated like stunted children. They're rather sort of anarchic and silly, and they play silly musical instruments and do daft things. It's very peculiar. So, as I say, it's nothing close to realism. We're in a sort of a weird kind of macabre make-believe world, like a fairy tale world, but uses the reality of 60s life instead of fairy tale castles and carriages. Another strange aspect about this film, and this is where Chabrol is starting to define his style and texture as a director, the actors don't emote much. They become mask-like, and this is where Stefan Audran is so important to Chabrol's auteurship and to his aesthetic. She's a wonderfully glassy, icy actress, very beautiful and very iconic, and she gives very little away with her face. And she becomes almost like a mask. What are her motivations? Is she in love with Jacqueline Sassard? Is she just using her? Does she want Sassard to go out with men? Or is, when she does start to go out with this man, immediately she moves in? So is she jealous? Or is this just her game? We don't know. We're constantly on the outside. We only intuit what the truth is. And this film becomes a mask, an MASQUE, a dance of masks. The whole film, everyone becomes a mask. So Jacqueline Sassard learns to keep her feelings behind this beautiful mask. And Chabrol is constantly framing actors so that we're never quite getting into their interior. So at one point when Jacqueline Sassard has been with Jean-Louis Trintignant, she comes back, Stefan Audran comes into the bedroom, they lie back on the bed together, and they're composed so that their two masks, their two faces fill the screen. They're not looking at each other, they're not looking at us, they're looking outwards into space. And we're trying to interpret. Later on, Stefan Audran moves in on Jean-Louis Trintignant. I can never say that name. And there's an interesting scene where she's sort of pacing up and down Trintignant's room, kicking against the sofa, Again, we're sort of kept away at a distance. It's a dance of masks, the whole film. And all the time we're coming closer to the truth of what these people feel. That's why I don't quite like the ending of the film, because at the ending of the film, basically, the Sassard character comes forward and we learn that she's troubled, that she's got mental health problems and that she's dangerously psychotic. It's like Chabrol feels he has to get the murder in there. He likes a murder. And he has to explain what's going on. It kind of disrupts the spell of the rest of the film, I think. But the spell has been cast. It's a brilliantly made film. Chabrol's really, the music is superb, the atonal music, the quality of the lighting, the way that Chabrol and Jean Rabier work together in the way that they have the actors, working around each other. This is where Chabrol really comes into being. And as I say, it's like, watching this film is like being a pond skater. You're like an insect scrabbling across this surface of water like glass. You never get down into the depths, which some people might find frustrating or a bit cold. But I don't think you come away unmoved. In fact, you come away feeling very disturbed. And that fascinates me. It's very different from Hitchcock, very different from Fritz Lang, the two directors who Chabrol is constantly compared to. He's doing something quite different. He's out there on his own. After this film, we go into a series of films that Chabrol made with Stefan Audran, which are called the Helene Cycle. And they are the high watermark, I think, of Chabrol's cinema. And we'll start to look at those next time. Thanks very much.